Okay, it's 10 o'clock, and we're going to officially call the Board of Funeral Directors and Embalmers meeting to order this Tuesday, March the 8th, 2022. Ask Ms. Bohannon to call the roll, please.
Fred Berry.
Present.
Anthony Harris.
Present.
Tanya Haynes. Chris Lee.
Present.
Scotty Porsche.
Here.
Charles Rahm. Pam Stevens. Mr. Vice President, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon. Before we move to the agenda, I'd like to make a warm welcome to Ms. Pam Stevens, our new appointee by the governor, funeral director from Franklin, Tennessee, and she'll be representing the Middle Grand Division. So, Ms. Stevens, we say welcome, and if you would like to have any opening comments, please do.
I am truly honored to be a part of this board, and I do appreciate the opportunity, and I will, to the best of my ability, serve the state of Tennessee with ethical and integrity best I can.
Thank you, and welcome again. And at this time, we'll move to review and adopt our agenda.
Move that we accept. Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Berry and a second by Mr. Lee. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right, agenda passes. Next, we will move to review and approve the February 8th, 2022 minutes. Give you a moment to review those.
Make a motion to approve the minutes as printed.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Berry, second by Mr. Lee. Any questions or discussions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Our minutes for February 8th have passed. Next item of order is the adoption of Robert's Rules of Order. The rules contained in the most recent version of Robert's Rules of Order shall govern the board in all cases to which they are applicable and in which they are not inconsistent with statutes and any special rules of order the board may adopt. And on this adoption, we will need a motion and a second. If there is any questions before.
Move that we accept.
Second.
Right, we had a motion by Mr. Berry and a second by Mr. Porch. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the adoption of Robert's rules have passed. Next, we'll move to the legal report, and this morning we have Mr. Anthony Glandorf, Chief Counsel of the Regulatory Boards Division, and Mr. Troy Bryant, Associate General Counsel of Regulatory Boards with us. Good morning, gentlemen, and we'll turn it over to you.
Morning, board members. The first complaint is complaint number 2021-06-4981. Complainant, sister of the deceased, filed a complaint alleging unprofessional conduct against respondent. Specifically, complainant contends that upon signing and paying the contract in full on June 25, 2021, they inquired about when the ceremony and family viewing could take place and were told by an employee of the establishment that they would not be able to do anything until they received the death certificate. Complainant maintains that they were never notified even after attempting to contact the establishment for a week. Complainant stated that respondent did not contact them until July 1st, 2021 and informed complainant that the deceased had been cremated back on June 25, 2021. Complainant picked up the deceased's urn on July 1st, 2021 and inquired about the death certificate. Complainant alleges that an employee of the establishment stated they would contact complainant when they received it. An hour after complainant left, complainant contends to have received a call from the establishment stating that they had the death certificate. Finally, complainant contends that upon picking up the death certificate the following day, she attempted to take a moment to sit and read the certificate. As complainant alleges, the establishment escorted complainant out without compassion or remorse. Respondent, the administrative manager of the establishment, replied stating that on the day complainant came into the funeral home, respondent was not present, but added that complainant was not escorted out of the establishment upon receiving the death certificate. Respondent stated that on June 22, 2021, they were provided permission to cremate the deceased with the medical examiner's office and provided documentation to show the approval. Respondent purports that on June 25, 2021, complainant called respondent and inquired as to whether the deceased had been cremated. Respondent contends that they confirmed with the establishment and informed complainant that the cremation had been completed. Respondent further stated that on July 1st, 2021, the establishment texted complainant informing her that the death certificate could be picked up, and complainant picked up the certificate the following day on July 2nd, 2021. Regarding complainant's concerns regarding a ceremony, respondent stated that complainant paid only for a direct cremation and attached a statement of funeral goods and services to reflect this. Respondent further provided that despite the complaint being opened against them as a funeral director, they never represented themselves as a funeral director to complainant in any capacity. This case was sent for investigation. The investigator spoke first with complainant, who reiterated that she was told the establishment could not proceed until the funeral home had the completed death certificate, and again alleged that she did not hear from establishment from June 25, 2021 until July 1st, 2021, even though she had made several attempts via text, email, and phone calls. Finally, complainant stated that she returned to the establishment on July 2nd, 2021, and was escorted out of the funeral home before she could read the death certificate. Complainant further alleged that she never received a final copy of the death certificate from the establishment and had to go to the health department to obtain one. The investigator was given by complainant a copy of the Statement of Funeral Goods and Services document. The provided document was identical to the copy provided by respondent and reflected a direct cremation service only. The investigator spoke to respondent, who claimed that no staff member ever informed complainant that the funeral home could not proceed with the cremation until a death certificate was filed. Respondent further denied that complainant was ever treated rudely after receiving the remains and death certificate. Based on the above and the documents provided in the scope of the investigation, it appears complainant pays strictly for a direct cremation service. Both parties offer conflicting stories regarding complainant's alleged removal from the funeral home. Both parties agree that complainant contacted respondent on June 25, 2021, and that respondent contacted complainant on July 1st, 2021. However, complainant provided no proof of the attempted communication within that week period, and respondent made no mention of those communications in their response. Therefore, we would recommend a letter of instruction regarding the responsiveness to complainant's attempted communications.
Open the floor for discussions or questions. I have one myself. Did the funeral goods, did it show a charge for the death certificate on there? Is there a reason why the funeral home did not supply that?
I do not recall whether there was a charge for that or not. The respondent didn't really address that in their reply, and quite frankly, too, it was the complainant, if I recall correctly, only mentioned it in the investigator's interview. They didn't even raise that issue in their initial formal complaint, but I do not know the answer to that.
Even though I'm new, I have a question. In the statements here, it says that she was given the death certificates at the funeral home, then later said that she didn't have a final copy and had to go to the health department. How was that?
I recall that the complainant used the term final death certificate. I'm not sure what was different between the copy and the document that complainant received from respondent versus what she purportedly picked up from the health department. I'm not certain of that distinction.
Could it have been a pending, maybe, in my mind? But in her initial complaint that she received a copy and was sitting down to read it, and when she asked for it out, I got the impression that she had received the death certificate, but I mean, I guess it's just a guess as to whether it may be a pending, and that's what she's referring to as a final cause of death.
Yes, it could be appended, but typically, a lot of times that's going to take a little bit longer. It's kind of a classic he says, she says, or I guess, can you give a little more information on why you think the letter of instruction versus just closure? Because it's very hard to determine what are the true facts with both parties. I mean, they're very different.
Yes, and certainly I went back and forth on whether closure or a letter of instruction would be more appropriate. The reason I essentially settled on a letter of instruction would be that due to the differences in stories, I focused on what the parties agreed on. They agreed that complainant called on the 25th, and they agreed that respondent called on the 1st of July. One party says that they tried to reach out, and the other never necessarily denied that or claimed that is what happened. So I thought that kind of that potential gap of communication was perhaps the only thing that I could potentially narrow down on for a letter of instruction. But again, I struggled with which one to come down on myself.
So,
That helps a lot. Go ahead.
so I've looked at my calendar in June of 2021. June 25th was on a Friday, and July 1st was on a Thursday, and you typically can't get hold of a medical examiner's office from, Friday afternoon till Monday morning to even get a cremation authorization. I mean, I personally, it's not a long time for not having any communication based on what has been happening with the pandemic and the number of cases that we've had as funeral directors.
I mean, it could have been a little more responsive, but that's really not that long of time either. I'm going to make a motion for disclosure.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Berry for closure. Do we have a second?
I second the motion for closure.
All right, we have a second by Mr. Lee. Any other questions or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion approves. Number 2.
Complaint number 2, complaint number 2021-073551. Complainant, cousin of the deceased, filed a complaint against respondent establishment alleging unprofessional conduct. Specifically, complainant alleged that 1. The body was not ready for review on October 28, 2021, the time quoted by the establishment. 2. The establishment delayed complainant from reviewing the body at the newly rescheduled time. 3. The parking lot of the establishment was blocked off the day of the service, forcing complainant to park in another business's lot. 4. The establishment did not allow anyone to enter the building until the scheduled time for the start of the service, thus not allowing for visitation time prior to the service. 5. Ignored earlier inquiries about streaming the service online for the next of kin who is unable to make it to the service, and then asked for an additional $200 for streaming the day of the service. 6. The establishment did not provide instructions regarding how to line up for the funeral procession. And 7. The establishment told a few people mingling inside the funeral home following the conclusion of the service to leave, as there was another service scheduled within the next few minutes. Respondent replied stating that the sister, next of kin of the deceased who lived in California, made all of the arrangements for the service. Respondent contends that complainant was only involved as the sister was unable to travel to the establishment, and that the sister required the complainant assist with paying and signing documents. Respondent contends they spoke to the sister daily and made arrangements for a family member to view the body on October 29, 2021, not October 28, 2021, and that no arrangements were ever made by the establishment with complainant. Respondent further stated that on Saturdays they blocked the entrance to their main parking lot due to the activity of the limousines to be used at services, but stated that their outsourced professional escort service were present to provide parking instructions to the family and how to line up for the procession to the burial site. Respondent further stated that on the morning of the service, the sister called and expressed regret she could not be present, but inquired about a streaming service. Respondent informed the sister that unfortunately the company they used charged $250 for the service, and arrangements had to be made 3 days prior to the service. However, respondent contends that they suggested and provided their personal phone to allow the sister to view the service and interact with other family members present at no charge. Finally, respondent stated that due to COVID-19 precautions, they opened their doors at 10 a.m. and contended that complainant opposed the establishment's request to wear a mask inside their building at all times. Respondent also attached to their response a thank you card and email from the sister expressing gratitude to the respondent establishment. This case was sent for investigation. The investigator spoke first to complainant, whose statement was largely identical to his former complaint. Likewise, the investigator spoke to respondent, whose statements were also largely duplicative of their formal response, adding that they spoke daily with the sister of the deceased and that all arrangements were made over the phone. Likewise, respondent stated that sisters scheduled the viewing of the body for October 29, 2021, and contended that the staff made photographs of the deceased, along with the casket and flowers to be sent to the sister, which respondent stated the sister was very appreciative of. On February 24th and 25th, the legal department attempted to speak with the sister to directly determine her experiences with the respondent. However, the sister did not wish to discuss these matters. Based on the above, we would recommend closure.
Questions or discussion?
I move that we accept counsel's recommendation of closure.
I'll second.
A motion by Mr. Berry and a second by Ms. Stevens. Any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Number 3.
Complaints 3 and 4 are the same set of circumstance. Complaint 3 against the funeral establishment and complaint 4 against the funeral director themselves. Complaint number for 3 is 2022000381, and complaint number for 4 is 2022000401. Complainant, brother of the deceased, filed a complaint against respondent establishment and respondent funeral director alleging unprofessional conduct. Specifically, the complainant, who purports to be the next of kin, alleged that respondent never consulted him for the arrangements of the deceased. Complainant further alleged that respondent only consulted with a non-related representative of the bank in regard to final arrangements for the deceased. As complainant contends, respondent informed him that the representative of the bank was the executor of the estate, but as complainant purports, respondent produced no documentation to prove that the representative had the legal right to plan the arrangements. Respondent replied stating that they were surprised to receive the complaint as they had never spoken to the complainant and only learned of his dissatisfaction with their services upon receiving the complaint. Respondent contends that the medical center where the deceased passed provided family contact information that included the name and information of the decedent's wife. Soon after, the representative of the bank contacted respondent regarding arrangements for the deceased, stating he was the decedent's executor and had received disposition directions directly from the decedent. As respondent contends, both the representative and the wife of the deceased met with the respondent during an arrangement conference. Respondent purports that the representative's arrangements directions were given to him verbally and through text message. During the arrangement meeting, respondent contends that the information for the deceased siblings were provided for the obituary information. Respondent maintains that the siblings were presented and listed only as, quote, siblings, with no distinction between them or contact information, and thus, respondent had no identifying information about complainant. Finally, respondent contends they spoke to the bank representative, who provided an email stating that complainant was made aware of the time of the arrangement conference. Respondent stated that they relied on the disposition directives given to them by the bank representative in good faith due to his impeccable reputation, and that they had never directly heard from complainant before, during, or after the service. The legal department spoke with respondent to gather additional information. In these communications, the respondent stated that the representative of the bank stated that they would do it the way the decedent wanted it done, and referred to phone conversations and text messages with the decedent. However, the representative was unable to present the text messages to the respondent. Further, the respondent stated the wife of the decedent was present with the representative during the arrangement conference and collaborated with the representative on the details of the arrangement in light of the decedent's wishes. At no time did the wife of the decedent express any problems with the decisions being made. Based on the above, the heart of the matter is a next of kin determination. Therefore, in both cases, we would recommend closure with any lingering next of kin determinations to be made by a court of competent jurisdiction.
Questions or discussions?
I'll move that we accept council's recommendation.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Berry, a second by Mr. Lee. Any further questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Number 5.
Complaint number 5, complaint number 2022002041. Complainant, son of the deceased, filed a complaint against respondent establishment alleging unprofessional conduct. Specifically, the complainant alleged that respondent did not provide the requested final accounting of services and other ancillary costs, that respondent made changes to the services without communicating with complainant, and alleged that respondent claimed they were relying on a note left by complainant's father, who had passed several years ago, regarding changes in final instructions. Complainant maintains that they have yet to see the note. Respondent replied, stating that on August 29, 1996, they met with the father and mother of the complainant regarding their pre-planned funeral arrangements. Respondent stated that they took careful notes throughout the meeting. Respondent stated that during this meeting, the father and mother of the deceased directed respondent to reach out to their daughter, sister of the complainant, if anything went wrong. Respondent maintained that in neither case was complainant to be contacted regarding the arrangements. As such, respondent reached out to the sister of the complainant to assume the arrangement responsibilities. Respondent maintains that they spoke with the sister of the complainant exclusively and provided death certificates that the sister had paid for. Respondent stated further that complainant bullied, intimidated, threatened, and attempted to defame the establishment while asking for the requested documents. Respondent contends that they informed complainant that they would need to talk to his sister since she had been handling all of the arrangements. In their response, respondent attached the handwritten notes they relied upon that denoted the sister of the complainant as the person with the right of disposition if anything were to go wrong. Presumably at the request of the respondent, the sister of the complainant wrote a letter corroborating respondent's recollection of events. The sister further stated that the issue regarding the death certificates is related to the fact that complainant refuses to speak with her. Based on the above, the heart of the matter is a next of kin determination. Therefore, we would recommend closure with any lingering next of kin determinations to be made by a court of competent jurisdiction.
Questions or discussion?
I'll make
I just think the fact that there was a prearrangement is a key point in this consideration.
I agree. I think they did well within their scope of what they needed to do. I'll make a motion to entertain council's recommendation of closure.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Lee, second by Mr. Berry. Any further discussion? If not, everyone in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Number 6.
Complaint number 6, complaint number 2022002121. Complainant, wife of the deceased, filed a complaint alleging unprofessional conduct on behalf of respondent funeral director. Specifically, complainant alleged that on November 28, 2021, respondent assured her that she would have her husband's cremains back home by Christmas. On December 15, 2021, complainant contacted respondent for an update on the cremains and death certificate, who stated that all permits are coming from Nashville and are backlogged. On December 20, 2021, complainant contacted another staff member at the establishment to inquire about the cremains and death certificate. Complainant was told nothing had been received, but that they would follow up with the respondent. On December 22, after consulting with a different funeral director, complainant was advised that this was not typical and contacted respondent. Respondent purportedly stated that they had been ill, but would follow up. On December 23, complainant alleges that the respondent contacted her apologizing, stated that they had forgotten to file for a death certificate. On December 27, the supervisor of respondent contacted complainant, apologizing for the error, and filed for the death certificate in person the following day. Complainant received the death certificate and cremains on January 3, 2022, and the establishment refunded the money paid for respondent services. Respondent replied, admitting that most of complainant's statements were correct, adding that they were not notified by their death certificate clerk that there was an issue getting the doctor to sign the death certificate. Respondent maintains that they were misinformed when they told complainant that the death certificate was awaiting the doctor's signature. Respondent further stated that they were not given updates and communications in a timely manner by the death certificate clerk, which led to the unfortunate situation with the complainant. Based on the above, we would recommend a $250 civil penalty for unprofessional conduct, authorized via consent order and formal hearing if necessary.
For questions and discussion?
Is there defense that they could not obtain a cremation permit without the death certificate, which they dropped the ball on, basically?
As I understand their defense, it's more so of they were under the impression that they were waiting on the doctor's signature and that there were issues getting that signature that their clerk did not alert them of.
My question is $250 enough for a penalty?
My thought was on the lack of disciplinary history on this particular funeral director. They had not been received any discipline prior. That was the large portion of what weighed in their favor of the recommendation of $250. However, if the board feels a higher penalty is appropriate, would not be opposed.
Well, it's happened to most of us. But is this a continuing process with them? Did you all investigate to see behavior of that particular?
To my knowledge, no, this is not typical. It's hard to say in the sense of that, not knowing every single time if maybe this happened to someone else and they didn't file a complaint. But again, looking at the lack of disciplinary history, if something like this had happened prior, it would pop up in our database and we would know if this were a pattern of behavior.
Thank you.
I am correct by the notes the establishment refunded the whole service.
That is correct.
That speaks well that they did refund the family. I'll make a motion that we accept council's recommendation of the $250 civil penalty and authorize consent order and formal hearing if necessary.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Mr. Berry, a second by Ms. Stevens. Any further questions? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Number 7.
Complaint number 7, complaint number 2022003811. Complainant, a funeral home based in New York, filed a complaint alleging that respondent establishment had not reimbursed funds. Specifically, complainant alleged that the deceased contracted with respondent for prepaid funeral services, which included a shipping charge to send the deceased to the complainant's funeral home. Complainant stated that the deceased passed on August 15, 2021, with services and interment held on August 15, 2021 and August 24, 2021, respectively. Complainant alleged that they still had not received payment from respondent as of February 1, 2022, despite making numerous calls and emails. Respondent replied, stating that they were contacted by complainant on February 1, 2022 to inform them that they had an outstanding balance. Respondent contends they tried to contact complainant to let them know they were mailing a check, but stated that the phones were busy. Respondent contends that they mailed a check to the complainant's address the same day. Respondent maintained that to their knowledge that this was the first time they were contacted regarding the outstanding balance. Respondent attached a copy of the check written to complainant to their response. On February 25, 2022, the legal department contacted complainant and confirmed that they had received the check for the entirety of the outstanding balance. Based on the above, our recommendation is a letter of warning regarding the untimely payments to complainant.
For questions and discussion?
Trying to confirm the time difference here. So how many days are transpired here?
I believe it is slightly over 6 months, and that the services were in mid to late August, and that the check was mailed February 1st.
Make a motion that we accept council's recommendation for the letter of warning.
Motion by Mr. Beery. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Lee. Any further discussion or questions? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Bryan, anything further from legal?
Only one issue remaining, which is the legal is in the process of filing a rulemaking notice, and that the date in, I guess, in light of the day requirement for those to be filed relative to the number of days that must pass, the board meeting that would come up for that hearing would be May 10th for the rulemaking hearing.
Thank you. Any questions for anybody on any of that?
That's just a matter for our information.
Yes, that's correct.
So further from legal, thank you for your report. We appreciate it. And now we'll turn to Mr. Gribble for the Executive Director's report.
Thank you, and good morning, board members. The first thing we have is a legislative update. And on this update, and I'll speak a little bit more in detail, Ms. Stevens, since this is your first meeting, we typically provide a legislative update of those bills that are either directly or indirectly affect the Board of Funeral Directors and Embalmers. And on this report, the first four bills are the ones that you probably want to pay the most attention to. House Bill 2103 and Senate Bill 2570. That bill has three parts. It would exempt funeral directors from being pre-need sales agents. It would require continuing education virtually, the removal of embalmer and funeral director's license. That it would involve a continuous two-way transfer of information. So in order for the person to get credit for their 5 hours of in-person CE, they would actually have to physically be present, or it would have to be via Teams, WebEx, or Zoom. And the third part of that has to do with an unlicensed assistant. It defines that. We don't have a definition in the current laws of an unlicensed assistant, but this bill would define that. House Bill 2352 and Senate Bill 1934 has to do with cemeteries, basically a master trust fund that they would have the opportunity to use as the funeral directors have had previously. House Bill 2830 and Senate Bill 2722 has to do with victims' rights, and it allows a person to file a petition for an injunction to prohibit the delivery of the remains of a victim of certain homicide offenses to the next of kin, if the next of kin is found to have committed the offense by a preponderance of the evidence, and requires the court issuing such an injunction to include in its order the next person to whom the remains must be delivered. That would be interesting, I guess, if it passes. But I guess the good part for the funeral director is that the bill does require the court to name the person to whom the remains will be delivered. So that will satisfy a lot of questions should that pass. And then House Bill 2054 and Senate Bill 2048 authorizes a medical examiner. Well, let me say there's an amendment to that bill. So the amendment basically has a medical examiner, a funeral director, the pronouncing physician, or the attending physician to be able to obtain the information regarding the decedent and filing the death certificate. So it basically eliminates the phrase or person acting as a funeral director. So it more narrowly defines who can do that. Of course, that's a vital statistics thing. It really doesn't directly affect the board, except the board has obviously jurisdiction over funeral directors and embalmers who would be completing those death certificates. As far as the report of the licenses administratively approved by the executive director pursuant to board authority for the period of February 5, 2022 through March 4, 2022, you have a list of those. Very slim this month compared to what it was last meeting, but there have not been that many that made the application and been approved this month. The closed establishment report, we have no closed establishments to report to you at this time. Since the last meeting, disciplinary action report is a report of consent orders that have been administratively accepted or approved by the executive director pursuant to board authority, and as reported on the January 22 regulatory board disciplinary action report. And you have a list of those violation and action law. As a complaint report, we have a total of 39 complaints, 17 that are either funeral director and or embalmer related, and 22 that are establishment related.
Just out of curiosity, how does that compare to previous year as far as number of complaints thus far?
Generally, the complaints are in very good condition, and there's not that's the number of open complaints that there is at the present time. Now I can probably explain this. There may be more parts to those complaints, but those are the complaints that we have. And the on a metric with legal outstanding actions are being.
Is it fair to say that the number of complaints that are coming before the board are less? How are we trending with that?
I don't think we're any less than what.
About average, then. I was just curious as to how.
I think you'll see in a lot of dissatisfaction among families as to who's in charge and who has control and who makes the decisions. And I think you've seen a very good number of those in past recent meetings that it's pandemic elevated because of the pandemic, but certainly not agree.
We need a motion to accept your report. I'll so move.
All right. We have a motion by Mr. Berry. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Lee. Do we have any further questions or discussions for Mr. Gribble? If not, everyone in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Gribble. And we'll move to applications for licensure. Are there any of those for today?
No individuals or no establishments appeared before you today.
All right. With the licensures to report, we will move into new business. And at this time, I'm going to open the floor to Mr. Berry to give an update on Mr. Gribble's trip to the conference.
Sure. First, I'd like to thank the Department of Commerce and Insurance, Mr. Gribble, my fellow board members for the opportunity to attend the annual meeting of the conference in Houston a couple of weeks ago. Also, a big thanks to the conference for awarding a scholarship to cover the cost. That's one of the main reasons I had the opportunity to go, and I think that was there's a lot of folks there that were like me from other states, and so I think that was a very positive thing that the conference did. Attending the annual meeting was a great opportunity for professional growth and opportunity to meet and network with executive directors and board members and educators across the country. On the first day, I attended a day-long training for regulatory board members led by the conference's legal counsel. His name was Dale Atkinson. The training was on the roles and the responsibilities of being a board member. And at that training, learned a great deal about other boards across the country as well and how they operate. On the next day, I attended an annual business meeting and then a presentation presented by the executive director of the Nevada Board of Funeral Directors and Embalmers. That was a very interesting presentation. The topic of the presentation was the subjectivity of dignity and respect as it pertains to the caring of the deceased while in the care of the funeral service providers. And as we all know, the average time the deceased is in our care or the care of a provider is increasing significantly. The presentation addressed specific regulations in Nevada has enacted to ensure dignity and respect of the deceased loved ones, the public perception, and the expectations of survivors. So again, that was really a great presentation by that executive director. Also attended a district meeting that Tennessee's a part of. This was a much smaller group and it allowed for great discussion on regulatory issues facing boards across the district. Then on the third day, I attended a presentation on the top regulatory cases involving different professions nationwide. So not only were they talking about the funeral profession, but we also learned about issues that were going on in other professions and coming before other boards and any challenges that they're having. That was very interesting as well. Also attended a funeral service administrators forum, and we discussed common issues with regulatory challenges, best practices, licensure barriers and obstacles, third-party providers, and the future funeral service regulations. And one of the hot topics there was recent changes to benefit candidates for licensure, such as allowing candidates to opt to share their pass or fail data directly with the educational institutions. And some time ago, the institutions were stopped receiving information, which basically puts them at a disadvantage because they can't really determine where they need to step up their game or where students having the most challenges. So hopefully by allowing this, the educational institutions are going to be able to better figure out where the needs are to help increase the pass rate. And that was kind of another hot topic at the conference was, what is the pass rate and is there an issue there or not? But that's one of the things that they're doing. Another hot topic was, just as it is in every industry, the manpower issues and things like that. And so one of the other things the conference has done is that they've changed the policy of when you can take the exam again. If you should fail the national board, how quickly can you take that again? And I believe that was 90 days before. Is that right?
Every 30 days now, I think.
And it's been changed to 30 days. And that is, again, to try to help people get through the system so that firms across the country have more people to hire and choose from. So in closing, attending the conference was a great professional growth opportunity and a learning experience. And I would highly recommend, if any other board members ever have the opportunity or staff of the department has the opportunity. It was a great opportunity and met a lot of great people across the country, and so it was a real opportunity. So thank you all for allowing me to go.
Thank you for sharing, and glad you were able to go. Mr. Gribble, any comments from you about the trip?
Oh, Mr. Berry he and I were in mostly the same meetings. There was a meeting or two that I was in, I went to the exam roundup meeting when he was in another meeting, and I was in a board meeting when he was. For anybody that might be listening to the board meeting today, they can take the test every 30 days, but what they need to be aware of that once you take it 3 consecutive times, and if you're not successful, then you have to wait a year. So even though they've shortened the time that you can take it in, you want to be prepared to take it when you go sit for it, because if you should not pass it on 3 tries, then the waiting period then is 1 year from the third unsuccessful.
Did have one interesting story on transportation. First time ever had a bad Uber experience, and on the interstate there in Houston, we had a flat tire. We were in the center lane of the interstate. It was very busy. We were right up against the concrete barrier. I was on the opposite of the barrier side, and there was I was about a distance of 1 foot from traffic, passing at about 80 miles an hour. Every time an 18-wheeler passed by, the car would shake. So we waited about an hour, and fortunately, a young man that was just passing by, actually on the opposite side of the interstate, saw that we were having issues, turned around, came back, and changed the tire, and he did that in a space of about like this. I don't even know how he changed it, but if it wasn't for him, Robert and I'd probably still be on the interstate, because the police, we never saw the police even after calling them. So that was interesting.
We're thankful that it turned out as well as it did, because seriously, it was not a good situation to be in.
Thankful to hear those good reports. And any other new business for the board today?
I guess just a question or a reminder. Back in December, made a motion that passed that we would have a committee that would work on possibly adding some guidelines for when it comes time for election of officers. And one of the things that I'd requested was some information from other boards on how they may handle that. And I think it was mentioned, I can't remember which board it was, might actually use bylaws and has a little bit more information about the structure of that. So I just didn't want that to fall off of our radar. I know we may miss a meeting or two in the year, but it sure would be nice as we move into December of this year that we have that resolved, and if there's if it's through any bylaws or I just wanted to keep that on the radar.
Mr. Glandolf had provided some information to me, and I've spoken to President Rahm, and it's still in the works.
Who should we send that information to for the committee? Just all the persons who are on the committee?
I guess the committee members.
Okay.
Which was Vice President, myself, and
Ms. Haynes.
Yeah, Miss Haynes.
Okay.
And then I think you informed us that would, if we met, that would need to be done in a public setting. So we would need some help.
It is right. We would do it that way. Generally, we would basically our legal office may communicate to you all individually to get some individual thoughts on it, so that we would not run afoul of the open meetings law. So that's generally what we would do with committees when we're trying to gather information, so that before the meeting we know that we've got the right information for the committee members to review. Yeah, that's what we'll do.
Very good.
And Mr. Glandolf may want to speak more to this. Mr. Rahm and I had a discussion. What Mr. Glandolf has sent to me goes into more detail than just a committee for nominating a president and a vice president, because it's actually what was the document called? The committee. It's
Their bylaws?
Yeah, it's a bylaws. It's more detailed and in depth
Right.
than that. So it's for the Board of Architect and Engineers, which they have four professions. They have architect, engineers, land surveyors, and interior designers. So, he can send the information to you, and then you can meet as a committee and decide, or give him feedback, or
maybe there's another mechanism. It doesn't need to be something that's very complicated. Just I just think there again. For those new board members, was talking about just to make sure of the transparency of that and how that's performed and how officers are elected. So I just felt like there needed to be more transparency, and so it just seems like some simple guidelines as to of how to could be put in place to do that. Just for example, let's say in the November meeting, it's mentioned that the next month the elections will be handled, and maybe at that time anyone interested in being an officer would let that be known. Maybe there's an opportunity at at the December meeting then for those that so desire. Maybe they need to introduce themselves, tell why they're interested in that, and then let there be nominations and the vote. So I think it could be something, a very relatively simple process, but I think it does need to be kind of written down, because right now it's just basically in December somehow nominations will be made, and so I think it could help to be a little bit more transparent with that in our meetings of how that process is done. That makes sense?
It does. The bylaws for architects and engineers has many items in there that you may not find useful for this, but it does provide an example of what somebody else has done for the elections of officers. So,
is the bylaws the only mechanism that we could add more clarity to that for our board?
Well, it's not. Well, it may not be. You just need to have a structured way of doing it. So if you want to have a structured way of doing it that would endure, that could be changed if needed to over time, bylaws are a great way of doing it. So it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be in a rule, because it doesn't affect the licensees out there. So bylaws are really the way to do it for the internal mechanisms of the board. Because other than that, it's just kind of the elections process just happens without guidance. So that's what I would recommend is the bylaws.
Bill, any other new business for the board?
I would like to answer a question that came.
Please.
There was a question on the number of complaints that were submitted,
right.
And so I was just checking our database here, and so in the last year, there were 100 complaints open under the funeral directors and embalmers licenses. In the last 2 years, there was 197. So it's about even, and we're seeing this is the time of year on the trend that we would have a downtick of complaints around March. And so it should move upward as we go into the summer and come out of September is generally the trend.
Okay, thanks for that. I was just out of curiosity.
Any other new business?
I know that this is new business, but again, I want to reiterate what an honor it is. And I wanted to thank Clark McKinney for his service that he's done over the past few years.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Anybody else? New business? If not, we will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Berry made the motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Lee. And officially at 10:53, we are adjourned. Thank you.